Margaret Rafferty. Margaret Rafferty.
I'm Dr. Margaret Rafferty, and I'm a registered nurse. Let me get this. As a nurse educator, academically trained in nursing and public health with over 35 years of experience, I find the recently released SGEIS report to be glaringly deficient. It falls woefully short of protecting our city's enviable water quality and the health of our 8 million fellow New Yorkers. I am particularly concerned about the shrinking buffer zone of 1,000 feet between the aging tunnels and aqueducts of our water system and the drilling sites. Drilling at this close range has the potential for catastrophic health consequences. Contaminating our water supply with the toxic chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing would set the stage for a public health emergency for every New York resident. Pregnant women, infants, children, and the elderly would be especially vulnerable. According to the SGEIS report, drilling companies have disclosed the use of 322 unique chemicals in 235 products in our state. There is not full disclosure in New York State, despite the fact that every medical group has called for the full disclosure of chemicals. Fracturing products are highly dilute when used to fracture shale rock, but when combined with the potential toxins are harmful at the part per billion level. Chemicals used in the process are known neurotoxin, carcinogens, and endocrine disruptors. Dr. Theo Corborn cited a broad range of potential toxicity of the chemicals. Over 75% of the chemicals could affect the skin, eyes, sensory organs, respiratory system, and GI system. 25% of the chemicals were carcinogens. 37% of the chemicals could affect the endocrine system, and almost 40 to 50% could affect the nervous, immune, cardiovascular system, or the kidneys. Materials that naturally exist in shale rock include arsenic, barium, chromium, lead, uranium, radium, radon, benzene, bacteria, and a highly corrosive salt. The synergistic effects of mixing hundreds of chemicals with shale rock components has not been studied. Not enough has been done to study the impact of hydraulic fracturing on the health of Americans. Many health professionals are concerned. Pediatricians who are environmental health experts.
Please sum up.
Oh, I'm gone. Okay, sorry. Hydrofracking should be back.
All right.
Banned.
Thank you. Peter Rue.
Well, I'd like to start out by testifying that the way these hearings are being conducted, it appears very reasonable. There's a giant clock and a table with a cloth on it and a gentleman up front here in a suit and tie. But what is being considered is an extremely unreasonable proposal. What is being considered is whether we're going to poison our land, whether we're going to poison our air, whether we're going to poison the water we drink out of. Now, earlier, the gentleman up front accused the audience here of being childlike, of acting like children. But let's remember, what is also being proposed is whether our children and our children's children are going to have to be drinking filthy water contaminated by hydraulic fracturing. Now, I consider this panel to be nothing but a rubber stamp for the gas and drilling industry. And it is a rubber stamp that is hovering over the necks of the people in this state. And we say no to fracking. And if there was a statewide vote on whether we would allow hydraulic fracturing, the answer would be no way. No fracking way. But there is a crisis in this state. There's a crisis for jobs, and there's a crisis for energy. And if Governor Cuomo is serious about solving these crises, he wouldn't be threatening public sector workers with layoffs and forcing them to take cuts. You know what he'd be doing? He'd be investing in sustainable energy and creating jobs and not poisoning our drinking water. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Thank you. Benjamin Levitin. Okay, come on. Thank you. Mr. Levitin, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ben Levitin, speaking on behalf of the NYU Environmental Law Clinic. As we've been hearing, there's a wide array of problems with DEC's hydrofracking proposal, and I want to focus on two problems with the SGEIS process. The first has to do with floodplains. DEC has said it won't issue permits for surface disturbances in 100-year floodplains, but floodplain maps for the state are woefully out of date. In fact, FEMA is currently updating its flood insurance rate maps for New York, and even DEC has acknowledged concerns about the reliability of current floodplain maps. Moreover, weather patterns are changing due to climate change, raising further concerns about our knowledge of which areas in our state are vulnerable to flooding. DEC should not issue any high-volume hydrofracking permits when we don't know if or where it can be done safely. The second issue I want to focus on is the comment period. DEC has rightly extended the comment period on this proposal by 30 days, but we still have another problem. DEC has set the same deadline for comments on the draft SGEIS, the proposed regulations, and the draft stormwater permit. But it's the final SGEIS that is supposed to explain the dangers of hydrofracking, taking into account comments submitted on the draft SGEIS. DEC should accept comments on the proposed regulations and draft stormwater permit after we've had a chance to see a final SGEIS that adequately addresses environmental concerns. We need to be certain that we can write our comments and make our decisions with the most complete information possible about the environmental impacts of fracking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levitin. Robert Cassara.
Good evening. My name is Bob Cassara. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak out on this topic. I live in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and I'm opposed to all hydraulic gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale. I'm opposed to it from two main environmental positions. First and foremost, it will immediately endanger our water resources as well as the water resources of upstate residents. And secondly, and more pronounced level, it will add millions of tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere and as a result of the burning of natural gas. According to Charles T. Maxwell, a lifelong oil industry analyst, natural gas is going to be our saving graces in this search for substitutes for oil, and we will be learning how to use it for a lot more things. It will be wonderful. He also claims that oil will reach $300 a barrel by 2020. By 2014, we'll be paying $140 a barrel, followed by $180 in 2015. The true long-term cause of higher prices and the drilling for unconventional gas, shale gas, is that the demand continues to rise for greater economic activity around the world. Think of countries such as China and India. If shale gas drilling does occur in New York State, a good amount of this gas will be exported. It appears that we are willing to put at risk our water supplies for China and other emerging countries, ever-increasing needs for energy. America has for too long built its economy on cheap oil, but we can see this house of cards is now crumbling. With unrest in the Middle East, runaway oil wells in the Gulf of Mexico, and now an environmental assault in our own backyards by the gas drillers and oil companies, it is time that we turn the page on our cheap addiction to oil and natural gas. As Thomas L. Friedman stated in the New York Times article on Wednesday, February 23rd, 2011, if not now, when? He states, the smart thing for us to do right now is to impose a $1 a gallon gasoline tax to be phased in at 5 cents a month beginning in 2012, with all the money going to pay down the national debt, the deficit. States could also follow suit and would not be tempted by the billions of dollars being offered by the gas companies for their drilling permits. Obviously, a fuel tax is not going to be very popular, especially at this time. But if we are going to get serious about energy use, it is only the real way to change energy usage. We can tax ourselves, or we can give the money to the oil companies or to foreign countries. So what are the real alternatives to these fossil fuels, fossil fuel energy supplies? The answers are conservation, wind, solar, and yes, nuclear energy.
Thank you.
In closing,
Thank you.
In
All right,
closing,
go ahead, you can close.
burning fossil fuels is wrong-headed and will certainly lead to catastrophic consequences within this century. We will be reaching the tipping point by 2040 to 2050. And there is no turning back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Katie Keifer, please. Keifer? Katie? K-E-I-F-F-E-R? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. No, not here? Katie Keifer, K-E-I-F-F-E-R? No? Okay. Keifer. K-E-I-F-F-E-R. Okay. Phil Simpson.
Good evening, Mr. Russo. My name is Philip Simpson. I reside in New York City and in Sullivan County. Sorry. I'm a lawyer. I'm opposed to hydrofracking. I'm here to speak to two issues of the SGEIS. The first of which has to do with local land use control, the ability of localities to determine for themselves where, if ever, hydrofracking can take place. The SGEIS, Section 8.1.1.5, which I assume you are familiar with, says the department's exclusive authority to issue well permits supersedes local government authority relative to well siting. I take that as saying the DEC purports to overrule local zoning. If that is what DEC intends to say in the SGEIS, I tell you, I have studied this issue for the last 2 months, and it is wrong. That is not the law of the state of New York. New York's Court of Appeals, interpreting the mine land reclamation law, in a couple of cases, has spoken very clearly. The mine land reclamation law has a provision which is very similar to the oil and gas drilling law on supersession, and the Court of Appeals has said that local zoning is not superseded by DEC. If the SGEIS purports to overrule local zoning, as I said, it's wrong. If the SGEIS does not purport to overrule local zoning, it needs to be revisited and clarified so that localities will know that they have the ability to determine for themselves where or where not hydrofracking can take place. This is a movement that is spreading across the southern tier through and into Sullivan County. There are localities throughout this region that have taken it upon themselves to determine through zoning that hydrofracking will not take place within their localities. This is an important issue that needs to be revisited and closely looked at by DEC, and I urge you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael White.
Michael White, noticing New York National Notice. With the introduction of fracking, New York State is about to suffer a colossal hit and run at the hands of the fossil fuel industry. Most hit and runs are accidents, not this one. This one comes at us premeditated and well-financed. When I was in government and my departing boss left me in charge of the legal department for my agencies, it was with a critical piece of advice. Just because someone tells you that you have to make a decision immediately, don't think you have to. You'll be better off waiting. Indeed, I know from experience negotiating, when someone is trying to rush you to make a decision, the rush is going to be to their benefit and your detriment. There are reasons the fracking companies want to do their dirty work fast. They want to get in before people realize how extraordinarily damaging fracking will be to the environment. Most damage is very long-term, and too much of it, like leaking wells, won't show up immediately. 5% of new wells leak, but 50% leak eventually. And they are aware that fracking, even though it was just invented, is about to be an obsolete technology. I refer you to economist Paul Krugman's recent Here Comes the Sun column for two propositions. That if the fracking industry were forced to internalize its huge external detriments and costs to the public, it is probably not economic now by any count. Solar cell technology is advancing so fast that even without the internalization, fracking will soon be uneconomic anyway. Virtually no corner of the state will be unaffected by fracking's external costs. Decades of water pollution poisoning, essential underground drinking water aquifers, drinking water in rivers and streams, water treatment facilities will be wrecked. Massive quantities of water usurpation, radiation poisoning in the form of released radium and radon, lasting for thousands of years. Earthquakes and instability of the land, significant poisonous air pollution, release of carcinogens, greenhouse gas pollution releasing climate-changing carbon that was safely sequestered for 400 million years. There is a sales pitch about economic benefits, but fracking is a resource extraction economy that builds up no long-term benefit compensating for the damage it will leave in its wake or the businesses it will drive out. Some might say that fracking companies just want to get started before the science is in on this brand new technology. I'd suggest they want to get started before the science that's already in gets out. Fracking is too destructive to be permitted at all, but certainly should not be permitted without significant protections not now in place or proposed, including prohibition on confidentiality covenants that prohibit the true facts from getting out, and lesser remorse covenants that allow landowners to terminate leases upon the unveiling of any misrepresentations of science or facts by the industries.
Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you. Amy Wolf.
Here is my written statement. There are links in there that would bring it up to here.
Thank you. Amy Wolf.
Hello, thank you. My name is Amy Wolf. I live in Brooklyn. I'm not a great public speaker, but what I do have is that I'm pregnant. I brought a pregnant friend. The reason that I mention that is because pregnant people are treated very special. They're told to not drink, to treat their bodies with organic everything, to stay away from chemicals, secondhand smoke. And I'd like to say that that's really great, and it lasts for 9 months, and then, what then? And so I request that you treat New York State like it's full of pregnant people. Pregnant people, little babies, if it helps, little puppies and kittens. You know, those folks that apparently are disposable, you know, worthy of being exposed to toxic chemicals, pretend they don't live here. They, you know, Pennsylvania maybe. My second thing is, energy is an amazing thing. You can get energy from a wide variety of sources, many of them renewable. Water, on the other hand, there's no substitution. And if you've ever been to Florida, I'm sure you've been there on vacation, you've probably tasted the water there. It's terrible. There are many states where you really don't want to drink it. New York is a wonderful place because our water tastes good. And it is a constant struggle Dozens of organizations for decades have been working to protect New York City's watershed. And it only takes one time to ruin that and to turn our water into the schlock that you taste in Florida. And personally, it's just not worth it. And so if there's no substitution for water, then we really can't take this risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Elizabeth Bois, B-O-U-I-S-S? I'm sure that wasn't right, but.
New York City water. Okay, my name is Elizabeth Bouyas, and I come to this hearing as a mother, a high school teacher, co-founder of No Frack NY, and a New York City resident. I'm here to express my unequivocal opposition to fracking in New York State and the Delaware River Basin. Fracking destroys water, land, air, and property values. Our most valuable resource is water, not gas, not oil, and not a profit for a few people. Our waterways are intricately connected, and the injection of toxic, poisonous, radioactive chemicals into the ground will most certainly make their way into our water. There's no way of regulating or controlling where these chemicals end up. We have only to look at our neighboring state of Pennsylvania to see numerous examples of flammable, noxious water and horrific accidents resulting from the hydraulic fracturing process. I also speak as a homeowner. I have a little farmhouse in upstate New York in Gilboa, which is located in Schoharie County, and I spend my summers there. And I, for one, consider New York State to be one state. My upstate community is still picking up the pieces from the devastating flooding of Irene. And here's the ironic part. My house is on the edge of the watershed, which under the proposed guidelines would be protected. And the flood must not have been informed about these protections, because if fracking was already in place, in my county, the flood waters would have gathered up and spread toluene, benzene, methyl ethyl benzene, radiation, and all those other chemicals used in fracking into the streams that feed the watershed of New York residents upstate and downstate. I ask, why is my water more important than that of upstate residents? And if fracking moves forward, is any water really protected? I say no. And I demand, as a tax-paying citizen of this state, that a permanent ban on fracking be implemented, and a green economy and support for local farms upstate is what we need instead of fracking. Once New York is fracked, we can never, ever go back. And I just want to say one more thing. I'm dedicating this to one of my students named Jeremy Soto. 3 weeks ago, he was going to school at BMCC, and 2 weeks ago, he passed away from asthma. He was 18 years old. And fracking pollutes our air and exacerbates people's asthma. And I don't want to see one more student have asthma and not one more death.
Thank you.
Ban fracking.
At this time, I would like to call speakers 49 through 59. Neil, Blayfield, and I would implore you to please come down in the very front so that we can get you to the microphone as quick. Wendy Robinson, Dimitar WKANOV. James Cyphers, Daniel Harpin, and Jean Rowe.
Okay, first speaker I have before I do is Tony Gamali.
Hi, I'm Tony Jabal, and I play the guitar. I was just reminded of my favorite characterization of what regulations are, which is that regulations exist to allow corporations to engage in activities which would otherwise be illegal. It must be clear to you, commissioners, that there's a growing groundswell against fracking, that as more people learn about it, they are against it. You can look around. We are not limited by age, race, or economic condition. We are young, old, men, women, all races, all backgrounds, all income levels. You've been spoken to today by teachers, carpenters, nurses, lawyers, architects, many, many walks of life. And the vote is in, sirs. Out of all the people, 50 this morning, 50 this afternoon, disregarding the one oil pipe salesperson, everybody but 2 were against fracking. Of the 2 who spoke for fracking, one was admittedly an oil industry spokesperson. Now, I was wondering to myself, here are the numbers. Why are we so worried that this guy is going to cause all this horrible stuff to happen? What are we worried about? We've got the numbers. Unless this one guy, and by the way, I will not mention this person's race, gender, economic condition, or I can't remember what else I was going to say, but you can guess. Why are we so worried about this? Unless this one person has some kind of access or influence that we, the people, the carpenters, the architects, the teachers, the nurses, the guitarists, that we don't have. Why are we so worried about this? What access, what influence do these people have that we don't? And I also began to wonder, why do these companies need to keep these chemicals secret? Now, what is it? Who's going to compete with them? The guitarists? I don't think so. Maybe Exxon is worried that Chevron is going to steal their fracking fluid formula. I don't think so. No, they want to keep this secret, not even from us, because they know that we don't want fracking whether or not we know the full list of chemicals. They want to keep it secret from you, because they know that if the commission knew the complete list of chemicals that they wanted to inject into our land, you would not permit this. It would be illegal. Now, I saw the logging, I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to skip right to the end. If we intelligently and wisely act for our future, our children, grandchildren, and beyond, we will have to make sacrifices, and I accept this willingly. But I would rather have a slightly lower standard of living brought by conservation, and not brought by environmental destruction, economic and energy policy short-sightedness, greed, and stupidity. We are in front of a universal law which cannot be fudged by legalistic thinking or pointing at rules and regulations and self-fulfilling definitions. This is the law of reciprocal maintenance. We have the capacity to create conditions worthy of our living in, but if we don't take care of our environment, it will cease to support us.
Right, thank you. Neil Bleifeld.
Yes, thank you for hearing me. I'll be brief. No amount of caution is sufficient to deal with this dangerous technology, which brings toxic chemicals and contaminating fluids into close proximity with the life's blood of humanity, our water supply. In agreeing to proceed with this technology, we are betting the long-term viability of clean, healthy life in our state against a short-term cash payout. And that's a bad gamble, I would say. The French have recently banned fracking over their entire territory. They happen to know a great deal about regulating dangerous technology. They have a well-developed chemical industry and a vast nuclear infrastructure. And they have come to realize that fracking is one technology that cannot be made safe by regulation. Likewise, the regulations proposed here are as spit in the wind. If not rejected without compromise, we will live to regret this imprudent course of action. It seems to me that the issue here raises a fundamental question we must answer as a society, for we are more than just an economy. Repeat, emphasis, we are more than just an economy. The question is this: is there no limit to what we are willing to do to suck the last dollar out of the ground, even if it compromises the very basis of our lives, our water supply? And well, I see I have a little bit of time. This is not part of my written remarks, but I just want to say it's strange and terrible reality that's going on here. This technology is extremely controversial and usually unpopular, and yet you are not required to convince us that it's okay. Instead, you turn democracy on its head, and we are forced to convince you not to poison us.